Good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us and welcome to this week's learning session from Training Location. We're an authorized DiSC distributor for Wiley as well as a channel partner with the Ken Blanchard Companies. My name is Bill Harshman, and I'll be your presenter today for this short, informative lesson. As presented previously, we know the four-quadrant DiSC model actually houses the total of 12 unique styles. This lesson continues and actually wraps up our increased understanding of not just the four quadrants with which you're already familiar, moreover, how changing proximity or the distance to a neighboring style within a particular quadrant actually yields a result which identifies a separate, unique DiSC style. So today's focus is on one of those styles, the DiSC or dominant-conscientious style. So where did this come from? Well, as the DiSC has evolved and become totally computer-based, the algorithms showed a much more robust capability to plot your dot very specifically within one of the four quadrants. Research showed that the analysis and weighting of the results placed the same styles in various places of a given quadrant. Simply put, the result was different degrees of the same style and slightly differing preferences and priorities. So what's in this for you? This lesson will be helpful if you haven't taken the DiSC or don't know your DiSC style, or if you are a style other than DiSC. Now, quick note for context. Any style with two letters is called a combined style. Depending on the sequencing of the combined style letters, the first style is more prominent than the second. For example, in the case of a DiSC style, the D is the prominent style and the quadrant in which that style is located. As such, in the case of the combined DiSC style, much of the criteria, such as priorities and qualities, etc., are reflective of the dominant quadrant where the DiSC style resides. So, a quick summary of the DiSC style. Let's start with what we know. We already know a couple basics about the DiSC style, which resides in the dominant quadrant. This D quadrant, including DiSC, D, and DI styles, has a pace of faster and outspoken, and is combined with an agreeableness quotient of questioning and skeptical, which we nickname result focused. And the brief list of observable descriptors still includes direct, firm, strong willed, forceful, and results oriented. Now, from our model, we also know that the DiSC style priorities differ slightly from those of the D and DI and include challenge, results, and accuracy. Now, as we proceed in this lesson, you'll notice one or more of these priorities identified in our DiSC candidate. And you can refer to our blog titled Everything DiSC Workplace Profile, the 8 Priorities, to help you understand more about the priorities associated with the DiSC styles, specifically the DiSC. Now, the thrust of this lesson is around the priorities and qualities that tie those aforementioned descriptors together. So let's begin by examining the DiSC priorities. So, priorities, which are listed around the circumference of the model, are the primary areas where people focus their energy depending on their DiSC style. Everybody has at least 3 priorities. Some might have 4, maybe even 5, but having more than 3 is no better or worse. So I'm sharing priorities from the Everything DiSC Workplace Profile in this example. Now, the Everything DiSC Workplace Profile priorities are unique to you and based on your results. Priorities simply help us understand how our style might be reflected in various motivations and behaviors given real life work scenarios. Now, the important thing to remember is that when things get foggy, such as when stress or uncertainty appear, we seek the priorities associated with our style. Let's review the priorities of the DiSC style, which, by the way, are shared with the adjacent CD style. So the first is challenge. The DiSC may seem skeptical and determined, and they won't accept ideas without questions, and they want to uncover problems that could affect results. Second is results. The DiSC prefers to deliver quality outcomes efficiently. Usually they're willing to take charge of projects when necessary and can be counted on to keep things on track. Third and last is accuracy. The DiSC prefers to refine their plans before acting to create the best solutions. They tend to avoid letting their emotions get in the way of objective decision making. Now, next, we consider the qualities of the DiSC style. These are similar to core needs that I've mentioned in previous articles. However, they are less unconscious and more at the surface near conscious observable behavior. So the qualities vary and are represented in scales. Now, just a note, due to the pairings of styles to form a particular scale, you'll notice that these dual letter designations are shared with their neighboring dual letter mirror. For example, the DC, CD styles are physically paired together and as such share style qualities. Same is true of the DI, ID pairing, the IS or SI proximity, and the SC or CS, or I should say and CS proximity. Now, the result is 8 disc scales instead of the 12, which you might expect. So we have 12 styles contained within 8 disc scales. Let me note here, though the DC and CD styles are separate and unique, you can consider these DC and CD styles as one scale when it comes to their qualities. So let's take a look. Let's review the qualities of the DC-CD styles, which include mastery, invulnerability, and resistance. Now, I want to break these down a little bit. So, mastery. If you ask the DC, they have a strong need for competency with their self-worth being tied to their skills. Critical thinking and common sense are their go-to resources. Also, the DC maintains high standards and can show frustration with any level of incompetence around them. And the DC can seem tenacious and determined to overcome any obstacle. Next, let's break down invulnerability. The DC expects life to be tough and usually avoids making themselves vulnerable. The DC has a strong sense of self-sufficiency, avoiding reliance on others. They avoid situations that could make them look foolish or incapable. And the DC may avoid public displays of sentimentality, which can seem manipulative to them. Third and last is resistance. The DC tends to be skeptical of their environment and often have a fundamental tendency toward resistance. They're proud of not caving to social pressure or accepting inferior ideas and policies. They resist accepting anything at face value. And last, when the DC notices problems, they're among the first to speak up and are often willing to challenge entire systems that seem inefficient or unfair. So where do the DC and CD styles differ? Well, up until now, I've referred to the neighboring styles of DC and CD interchangeably in terms of the overlap of their priorities and their qualities, respectively. However, it's important to remember they're two different unique disk styles. The placement of their dots on the disk model is determined by computer algorithms, and I want to share some clarifying information to help make this distinction clear. The table here shows the two styles that they share priorities and qualities. However, they differ in terms of their other criteria as determined where their dots fall within the different quadrants on the disk model. So take a moment just to look at a couple of areas that where they differ. For example, their overuses or their fears. So, to some, these differences may seem very subtle. However, lumping the two styles would be inaccurate. One of our principles shows us that each and all 12 disc styles are unique and equally valuable. Let's continue. So, that was a lot of new, detailed, complex info. What do I glean from that? How do I apply meaning to my daily life? Well, consider this. There's an implication for leadership. The DC style gets 360 feedback from their managers, their direct reports, their peers, which points to the lowest ratings when it comes to being approachable. Conversely, the DC style got their highest ratings when it comes to speaking up about problems or insisting that things be different. Now, let's consider some of the assumptions operating within people that have the DC style. If you're DC, see which one of these are more fit for you. I'm valuable if I'm competent. I should always be self-sufficient. If I'm not in control, I open myself up to disaster. I should have complete mastery in all areas of my life that are under my responsibility. And last, it is undignified to show intimate emotions. So the so what? The so what is for the DC to consider how they would increase their effectiveness. As always, at a glance, the DC tends to have a higher than average need for competence and for control. They describe themselves using words like stubborn, determined, logical, and critical. They have been known to be unassailable and will defend even a bad argument to protect their pre existing beliefs. There's more of a tendency for them to get bored with routine compared to other styles. And as such, they're often the people who get things changed. However, this can also be a challenge for the DC when major change is facing an organization at a much slower pace than they would prefer. And one more thing, the DC can blur meanings of blunt, honest, diplomatic, and direct when it comes to communication. However, each one can have a different nuance and a different implication. Oh, one more thing. What about the nonverbals of the DC style? I'll let that question sit with you. So there's a lot to consider in that DC communication style we've used for so long. I hope this overview has increased your awareness, your knowledge, and your familiarity of the DiSC, and specifically the DC style. Whether your needs include leadership, employee engagement, culture change, or simply communication 101, DiSC is the research-based, proven leading training solution. It's impacted more than 8 million learners in over 130,000 organizations and through 14 languages in over 70 countries worldwide. Here's the two bullet points I want you to remember. DiSC provides a quick and intuitive way to understand yourself and others. DiSC delivers immediate and lasting impact on the performance of people and organizations. And as always, the key to effectiveness through DiSC is understanding your and others' styles, then using that knowledge for improved interactions. We have several everything DiSC assessments to help you craft individual and team solutions. And here's our contact information. And before you go, I'd like to extend you a resource and a request. I'll be happy to send you a sample PDF of any of the DiSC profiles you see on our website. Or if you'd like to discuss a complimentary live webinar introducing DiSC or one of the profiles to your team or organization, please use the email shown, info@traininglocation.com. Be sure and check out our learning blog, traininglocation.com, and click on blogs and keep an eye out for our next article in the series. And before you close your screen, we always appreciate your like, your share, a download, and of course, for continued learning, please subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss any new content. Thank you for joining us, and goodbye till next time.